everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Kelsi Sheren Perspective. Before we get into this one, please go do us a huge favor and everyone else around you. Go subscribe to the YouTube and the Spotify. Check out our sponsors. And most importantly, before you get into these types of episodes, be aware that we are talking about hard things and things that might make you uncomfortable, i.e., if you are listening to this episode and you have tiny ears in the room, I please suggest that you turn this one off and save this for adult time because we don't like to put adult problems on child's minds. In saying that, we have Alex Schadenberg with us and we have our amazing Tammy whistleblower that you guys have been waiting to hear from. And now that you knew she was coming, you have all been asking. So without further ado, please welcome Tammy to the show. Let's do this again, my friends.
Yeah, this is an important story, I think, for several reasons, not only from what Tammy experienced, but there's quite a few nurses, etc., medical professionals who have told similar stories, but weren't willing to go to the media or be interviewed by anybody with it. So Tammy, I'm really thankful for because she's a little bit gutsy, and that's what it takes sometimes.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. And Tammy, it's like we said, and just full transparency, everyone, we did a full episode on this before and we've had to re record. So if it feels like we're nonchalant about it, please do know this is because our second time around. But most importantly, Tammy is an individual who is going out of her way to expose a system that she had worked in that has not only been um, tumultuous and difficult for her to process, but for anybody else in the system. Alex Schadenberg did an incredible roundup yesterday as a post election and what it looks like for MAiD and what's kind of coming on the pipe. And essentially, it looks like it's more of what we're having now, and it's only going to continue to expand with looks like no no chances of stopping. So, Tammy, your interview was so important because of who you are, what you've done in the system through the past 9 years of the Liberal Party, and what the healthcare system has become. So, in saying that, can you please tell us a little bit about who you are and why you decided to start speaking at all?
Well, I am a registered nurse or was a registered nurse for since 1986, and I worked in a few different areas, but mostly dealing with gerontology, older people, medical conditions, which are often very interrelated and complex. And it's probably around 2008 that I started working more specifically into end of life care with this within a certain organization that really focused in on that. The whole facility was that was their primary mandate was end of life care. And
Yeah, you were palliative care, right? You were involved palliative care,
I
correct?
don't use that word because I've seen how over
Right.
the years they've amalgamated and downplayed that word to mean end of life, which it does not. And that was probably the first thing that started tickling my intuition around what's this palliative care, palliative care. They're coming in with the palliative diagnosis. Well, they're palliative. And it was just the slow internal drip of the change of this word where I became really quite concerned because it bridged a gap that didn't doesn't can't be bridged because end of life and
Right.
terminal was very different from palliative. When we trained up, and still, if we check our dictionaries, the word palliative means to care without cure. And to have everybody deemed palliative, therefore end of life, is wrong. And it causes a great amount of dissonance within me. And then that was the initial step that had me starting to ask a lot more questions.
So, just to be clear for the listeners, palliative care meant it didn't mean that you were dying. It meant that you had an illness, an issue, something that didn't mean you were going to die, but it just means you needed more care, more support in a location. And now Canada has shifted the direct definition of what palliative care should have meant or did mean, and is now utilizing that as a blanket term, as an end of life, as if you're dying, even if you are not. And the reason I'm saying that is because you went through several scenarios where individuals were placed in the palliative care facility who were just
Mm,
recovering from surgeries, but due to their age,
mm,
were left to their own devices, i.e., die. And the reason that's important is because we understand the significant impact of what it means when you are around somebody that is ill or die. It is no different than, and not to downplay life, but to take a look at a very simple example is to, if you get a pack of strawberries and one strawberry in the entire pack is bad, what happens to the rest of them and how quickly do they go bad versus ones that doesn't have that in the facility or in the location of the pack.
Correct. Yeah. And that's what I had seen is that many conditions that we exist in, everybody, is palliative. I started really doing a deep dive into that word. And yes, all diabetics, all asthmas, all, if it's not curable, therefore it's non remediable, it is palliative. And therefore, that should just be
Right.
allowed. But we all live in states of palliative existence because there is no cure to many of these autoimmune diseases, chronic diseases, slow deterioration of just the human body when we age out into like cardiac function, respiratory function. You become COPD and
Correct.
you're palliative, but nowhere near the end of life. I have met many individuals who've been palliative for 20 years who live vivacious, wonderful, active, um, beautiful lives, yet they're palliative. And then this really starts concerning me when we start looking at the mental illnesses and the mature minors. That's a very, well, it's no longer a slippery slope, it's a cliff. And we're just pushing them towards it, the system.
Before we before we talk about the system a little bit, I want people to understand who you are and understand why this has been such a shift for you because the personal toll it has not only taken, but the lifelong career that you have had in this position is not something to be brushed past. So why don't you talk to me about why you even became a nurse and why you even became somebody that showed up for others and witnessed and was willing to bear witness to this?
I think the fundamental answer is I'm a humanitarian first. I've always been a people person. I've always worked in service, whether it's waitressing, cashiering, volunteering with youth. And so nursing just seemed a beautiful balance between people and biology, my two loves. And so when I started off
Mhm.
in nursing, it was an exploratory adventure to see where I could serve best. Um, Ultimately, I served my family first and my children, and then the career was sort of secondary. And I took some time off. But when I went back in um, with more intention in 2008, I was very pleased to learn and discover this field of end of life because it married two areas of nursing together. Well, it clarified it. There was the science of nursing and then the art of nursing. And as much as I'd love to be in the OR with my hands in the body doing the science of nursing with the biology, my heart and my um the sense of achievement came from meeting families and individuals and helping them all balance this dynamic of life and finding joy and the best we can in day-to-day living with regardless of what scenarios are going on. And truly, when I started working in end of life care, it truly restored my faith in nursing because I was now allowed to see the whole person, their family, their dynamics, and I could nurse everybody through helping them all assess and look at their biological, psychological, and sociological aspects of their process. And so to find this building where I could actually um, help these help individuals journey towards end of life with their family. It was such an enriching environment to see the love that's poured out at the bedside and the holistic success, I guess, that people can have at end of life through, um, the telling of stories, reconnecting with estranged individuals, moments for forgiveness, how this existential suffering we're often hearing about
Right.
can actually be resolved through a sense of meaning and giving people some some I guess grounding into this concept of death. Our Western culture is so death phobic. No one really talks about it until it's like bam, right in their face. And then they're making knee-jerk responses. And
Right.
unfortunately, MAiD started coming out as an option and a very unbalanced option with not a lot of support from the other side. And that's became very concerning to me.
So, Tammy, it sounds like you're a real people person. So you were probably excellent at the bedside with people when they were going through difficult times and they just needed somebody there with them. Would I be? Yes. You seem to have that personality, that connection.
Yes, and it was quite a revelation for me to even realize that I could hold that space because I had no idea. I didn't know what working in a place that focused on death was really going to do to me in my psyche or my heart or my soul. But then I came to understand as I was going through my own healing journey through trauma and relationships and looking at the bigger scope of humanity that this is exactly what I was doing at the bedside with these other people was learning to walk into their world story and their view and help them manage this bigger picture. And when I I came to question how come I can do this so well? Why don't I get more emotionally unstable? Because a lot of people would say, "Oh, I could never work there. I'm too sensitive." And it's like, "Oh, well, I'm not a cold-hearted, bleep." But this was a deep dig for me. And I truly know now that it was my trauma healing and the wisdom and the tools and the effects of being healthy and my self care that allowed me to walk into those rooms and face this monster of death and to reframe it, to structure it for these individuals, to bring them alongside the journey instead of saying, this is what's happening to you. This is what's happening for everybody because life is palliative. Life, there's no cure for life. We're all going to die. The question is, do we truly live? And that's where I could see finding those glimpses of life within the day. It was a profound moment when people would ask me, "Am I dying?" As if it was just the first time they sort of pondered this thought and to find a way to be able to look at them and say, well, yeah, it does appear as though your signs and symptoms are changing and you're heading in that direction, but not today. There's life today, and that's what we're going to focus on. And how can we make the daily journey a bit better and finding joy in the now?
Do you feel like that mentality as a nurse has been bred out of the upcoming nurses and the newer nurses and doctors? Because when you speak about this is happening and you express to someone and maybe you break it to them for the first time that yes, based on your sign of you are in the active dying process, do you feel like the way that Canada's healthcare system has been designed recently that they're told that once that happens, it's over. There is no point in keeping them happy or expressing that maybe they still have life in them to share and to participate in because the thing that you expressed to me before, you said we had a gentleman that was in the active dying process. And I believe you said he was on some ungodly amount of morphine, but he was still up walking around smiling. So you can still be in the active dying process and still be experiencing positive life.
100%. And that's the sad thing that I seen happen was that this, I don't know, their trajectory towards death was just accelerating, and from the mindset of the nurses coming into the facility, the younger grads, to the bureaucratic push to just clear the beds out, to this, yeah, to where people are jumping ahead with comfort medications just for their ease of a shift and less distress for the family because it is uncomfortable. It is hard work, but it can be beautiful. And yeah, the gentleman you speak of, it just amazed me that he was walking around with the equivalents of what was it, 2,600 milligrams of morphine a day in his system as an 85-year-old man, articulate, cognizant, clear, lucid, happy, and not in pain, not suffering, living his life. And I found repeatedly that was the primary lesson I got to share was the importance of going low and slow with pain medicines, preserving cognition as much as we can, because many things affect the cognition. But if you jump ahead of them and start walloping with big doses that knock them out, they never wake up. And that was typically and usually the biggest concern from the families was those precious moments for every word to share with their loved ones while balancing that pain, discomfort, or all signs and symptoms. And pain, the body will transmute all thought, suffering into pain if it's not addressed.
Can you talk to me a little bit about what you were seeing from Health Canada? Because one of the biggest things that makes you such a, other than just being really good at your job and willingness to speak out against what I would consider a breakdown of our systems and evil at the realm, at the helm of what it is supposed to be care. Like we're not caring anymore. We are death care. We are not health care. So talk to me about what you were seeing in the system because most people, for example, I have a very good friend that's been friends with me since grade 5. She just finished her nursing degree 2 weeks ago. She graduated. And I said, "Oh, dear God, did you know that you were about to be a hired gun for the government? Because you're not going to be what they tell you you're going to be." So, talk to me about this rollout you were seeing over the past decade or since 2016 with the legalization. Talk to me about what you've been seeing. And by legalization, I mean amendment to the criminal code, because don't get it twisted. We didn't legalize murder, we just amended the criminal code. So, talk to me about what you were seeing in this profession because it's a very slippery slope from 2016 on.
Well, I think the primary thing I've learned is there are no safeguards for nurses to report anything um, of their moral concern. I was profoundly saddened and shocked to see the lack of engagement for my very serious professional concerns for policies, criterion, and procedures not being met. I and the second thing before I forget is going to be my grand assumption that I assumed I was the final safeguard for safety to the one at the bedside. But I have learned that my voice is irrelevant as a nurse. And with no protection to safeguard that individual for any reason, especially MAiD, is really concerning. When the nurse no longer has a professional voice at the bedside, I don't have to be right and I can even be wrong, but I need to be heard. And if you can't even be heard within this multi-level, huge, faceted, like we're redundant, the whole nursing profession is bust. Whether it's the union, whether it's the college, whether it's the Ministry of Health, no one particularly cares what I've experienced. And they just quickly flush you and toss you out to left field under the bus, and your burnout, moral distress, your whatever mental health allows you to leave, and they just, well, another one, and we're just exterminated. That's why there's been a 30-year nursing shortage in BC. Where have all the good doctors gone? They flee when there's no leadership, no support, which is contra to all of my education, all of my understanding. It was truly trauma invoking for me in my trauma history to be denied, rejected, abandoned, left out in left field to just rot alone was shocking and very destabilizing for me. So, yeah.
Tim, you mentioned about a lack of oversight, and you had thought in the beginning that at least as a nurse, you would be able to provide some sort of safety net for patients. Can you comment about that? Because obviously you did not participate in MAiD, but you had MAiD actively happening around you. So you did see what was going on.
Yes. Well, where I worked, it was
And brought to you by Ketone IQ. If you guys have not heard or seen me drinking these little bottles right here, you have been missing out. These guys right here are single-handedly the biggest part of my routine. Outside of the functional mushrooms, the movement, the sleep, the hydration, Ketone IQ is a number one most important tool that I use in my toolbox. And let me tell you why. If you guys have never experienced runner's high, give this a try. That flow state, it is for real. Ketones are a uniquely powerful macronutrient that can cross the blood brain barrier, and they increase the brain energy efficiency. And every time you take a ketone IQ, you're going to notice the radical boost in performance, endurance, and just focus in general. For me, I use this when I road bike, when I run. As a mother, instead of using caffeine after 12 o'clock, I go and grab a ketone. More importantly, I use it before I podcast, before I do keynotes or anything important in my life. You will see a ketone in my bag, on the table, or anywhere near me. So do yourself a favor. Once you're done listening to this awesome episode of the Kelsi Sheren Perspective, go on over to the website partner.ketone.com/Kelsi. You're going to save, go grab yourself a subscription so you never miss out and you always have the energy you need.
We worked in in hospice care, end of life care, where a natural death was being allowed. And then in 2016, we started hearing about the MAiD rollout, the MAiD protocols coming. And because we were an external facility to the bigger hospital, the IHA, we kind of felt a little, you know, special, sequestered. This is what we did. And as MAiD was unrolling at the bigger institutions, hospitals, I was getting concerned because whenever we had empty beds, they were sort of pushing people towards us. And it's like, well, it really started to sound really schizophrenic to all of us nurses and people working there because we did everything we could do to allow a natural death and finding that very fine line between prolonging life and hastening death. And that became my expertise, my specialty. And to be able to have those conversations with families and with people that they don't need the fluid, they don't need the IV, it's just going to complicate things. Conversations like they're not eating because they're dying, not that they're dying because they're not eating, and to explain the bigger dynamic of the homeostatic shutdown of the body was beautiful for them to come alongside and journey with us in this process and to actually see them engage and learn and understand and then to leave the facility with a sense of achievement, accomplishment that they did aid and help their loved ones in a comfortable passing. But that didn't last long when we started seeing these that MAiD might be coming to our facility. And it's like, how do I hold this space? Valuing every breath and knowing the significance of that. And then having some of these people only come to our facility to just be held there for a few days to go back to the hospital to go get dead later. And it was like, wow, that's pretty strange, especially for me as a nurse, because I never seen any paperwork at all around the MAiD process for this individual. And it's a primary responsibility and a safeguard that these individuals meet the criterion for a procedure that they're going to be receiving. And if it's touted as just another procedure, well, then where's the paperwork? I need my ticky boxes. I need to know that we've tried all pain management, that they've had psychological counseling, that there's been supports in other ways, and the criterions have changed over the years. But often when I went through just the little public brochure, I couldn't find any evidence of this in their chart. Then I would ask, well, where's the paperwork? How come there isn't? And a lot of this was just done orally. There is no paperwork. We were informed verbally not to discuss their choices with the individual, which was another strange violation of my nurse-patient relationship. What do you mean I can't talk to them about the choices? And that became very disturbing especially when I could see that they hadn't even been properly pain managed yet. People are coming in on Friday because they got the brochure on like Friday. They came into us. Now he's going to go back and get dead on Tuesday. No pain meds on board, no supports, no counseling. We, in the 3 or 4 days we had him, got his pain hugely managed, educated the family. He was active now because pain was managed. And on Tuesday, he's going to go back and get dead. And I have no permission to speak into his possible changing of his choices, his ideas, and it was just like, why? Where did this how can this be if I'm the safeguard at the bedside? And it's a presumption I made, I guess. We
So
aren't.
and this is something I really, really do want to highlight. You, as the nurse practitioner who is responsible for this individual's care, is quite literally the last line of defense against a very pro-death eugenic healthcare system. I really struggle with even using the words healthcare because this is not at all what is being given left, right, and center. And so if you're telling us you were supposed to be the safeguard and you're now saying out loud, I am not even allowed to be the safeguard, how do people like Dying with Dignity and all of these other very pro-death, pro-give up, pro-die, pro-just end your life early because life is hard, how can they sit there and lobby our Supreme Courts and say we have some of the strictest safeguards, but yet the people who are on the front lines, our nurses and our doctors are saying there is no safeguards. There's so much that there's not a safeguard that we are quite literally telling them, you cannot say this, you can't write it down. So here's how this sounds to a normal average person.
Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by Row Nutrition. If you guys have not heard of them, please stop what you're doing right now. Go over to their website at Row Nutrition and take a look, because you guys know more than ever, I care so deeply about my mental well-being, my physical, and my TBIs. I do everything I can to look after my body, whether that's cold plunge, ketones, or otherwise. But Row Nutrition is my newest additive, and I have to tell you, I am feeling like money. Let's talk about it. If you're struggling with brain fog, you are slower to recover at times, and you're feeling more down, even if you feel like you're doing everything right, like I was doing, this is what you need. Let's talk about why. The reality is, when you hit your 30s, I'm going on 36, your body's NAD levels, a critical molecule that fuels your energy recovery and brain clarity, they drop by half, nearly half. No wonder we're all burnt out. And that's exactly why I partner with them. They use a liposomal NAD. And let me be completely straight up with you and honest, it's incredible. Normally, you need to go and get NAD IVs for this result, but not with Row. I am experiencing sustained clean energy, sharper focus, which we all need, and faster recovery. I don't have any jitters. I don't have any crashes. And this is an energy like others that keep me performing my best. It's critical. Let's talk about NAD in general. It fuels your mitochondria. If you guys don't remember high school science, that's what we're talking about. That is the powerhouses in your cells responsible for your energy and clarity. And like I said before, the only real way to get it before was really expensive, uncomfortable, which I've done, IV treatments. But Row Nutrition has completely changed the game with their new technology. No needles, no downtime, just maximum absorption and results. I have felt the change, and you guys know I only use products that I actually use. So I want you guys to go and give this one a try. It's risk-free. So it is backed by their 60-day money-back guarantee. And I believe in this enough to give you guys 20% off. So go head over to rownutrition.com/discount/Kelsi20 and use your code Kelsi20 at checkout. Now, the one thing I want you to understand is that when you do this, you're not just doing this for you. You're doing this for everyone else around you, because when you feel good, others around you start to feel just as good as well. So go check them out. Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Good Living. I am so excited to tell you about something that's become such a meaningful part of my wellness routine, Good Living. Now, this isn't any brand. This is actually a brand I know all of the owners behind. And let me tell you, their integrity, their dedication, and their quality is the real deal. Their microdosing and functional blends are crafted with intention, and you can feel it. Everything is tested and made to support you in tapping into your own rhythm. We're talking about blends for anxiety, depression and stress, ADHD, brain health, inflammation, sleep, and energy. Seriously, they have thought of everything possible. I know firsthand how much love they pour into every single product. So if you're ready to check them out and explore more, go to itsgoodliving.com. And trust me, it's a journey worth taking. That's itsgoodliving.com, itsgoodlivin.com. And make sure to use the code BRASS and get 20% off your first order today.
This sounds like Stockholm Syndrome. You can't say it out loud. You can't address it. And don't you dare write it down. Last time I heard this was when we got a Freedom of Information Act from the Prime Minister's office as they offered MAiD to veterans and very strictly stated, stop writing it down. At no point can that not be something like, what, how can we not have alarm bells in our Supreme Court going, our nurses are saying we're not allowed to address it. We're not allowed to talk about it. And one of the best examples that we're seeing right now, and it bears speaking about, is WV and MV, who this child is a 28-year-old autistic girl who is healthy. She is healthy. She is a literal victim of a broken healthcare system. And as she is going to be, by the looks of it, mated off the face of the earth because the family doesn't have any more money to fight, because the government itself and Danielle Smith is not stepping in as the premier, which she should be right now, and making an example of this case. So I will always come at her for that. And then also acknowledges
Yeah.
it on public that this is happening to, what is it, 1 in 20 Canadians? How is no one saying there's no safeguards? You're screaming, there's no safeguards. I'm not allowed to talk about it. I'm not allowed to write about it. I can't stop it in court. So then how do we protect our people from these predators? Because these people, not every healthcare practitioner, but there's going to be a subset of psychopathic individuals that are in these systems and places of power. You know, we see it in government. Look at Justin Trudeau. We see it in policing. We see it in Colonel Russell Williams, who murdered a bunch of people. People in positions of power and people like that, these people who want to control, take lives, and do others, they go into these places, they bring themselves up, and they have this God complex. How are we supposed to protect our loved ones when we send them to the hospital to get what we think is life-saving care or palliative care so they can live out their life comfortably, when our own nurses are telling us that we do not have safeguards and we cannot protect them?
That is correct. And I think the only way that they're able to do it is they have a different agenda
Yeah.
than what I have. I value life. I see the goodness and strong, like effective palliative care at the bedside, even into end of life. There is comfort available to all. No one needs to suffer. I don't know. I've learned a lot in the last few months, and I will agree that it is a cult. It
Yep.
is some push from somewhere that I never saw any what literature in the chart for the individual, no tracking, no like confirmation that criteria have been met. When I saw that the paperwork within the organization was sort of changing to include this benign word palliative, you know, it was an expected depth of palliative. That's expected. This is actual, like changing here. Anything with from the Ministry of Health or wherever it comes down from. And it's fun when I read through the MAiD laws to see that it says that all of these criteria and all these types of diseases, including palliative, those three words is the crutch, because anything that follows that, including palliative, the preamble to that is irrelevant as long as they're palliative. And that's the word. And that came in, and it's like, no. And when I asked one of my leaders, like, excuse me, I need clarification from higher up. Does end of life mean palliative? And her exuberant response is, oh, yes. And it's like, no.
Hey everyone. So this episode has been shorter than usual, and we've obviously had some technical difficulties. But what I do want to tell you is that we have scheduled a in-person with Tammy and Alex that will be coming out next month. So this is, although it is short, and there are some corrections. Tammy is not a nurse practitioner; she's a practicing nurse. So for those that want to nitpick, we just wanted to clarify that for you. But if this is a harsh story for you to listen to, I can promise you, part 2 is a little crazier. So do yourself a favor. Go touch grass, go hug a loved one. And also, when you send your people to the hospital, make them aware of what's going on so that they can have the tools to protect themselves from this pro-death cult, from these doctors and nurses who are trying to hasten their death. And again, please do go subscribe, go check out the sponsors. Everyone right by me here, you've got, on this side, we've got Good Living, you've got Row, and you've got Ketone IQ, as well as XXXY. And you can't see them up there because they are on my feet. Anyway, guys, thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode. I will see you all next week.